Hi, my name is Charlie Wasserman. I'm going to be talking today about the impact of audio environment on attention, and we're just going to dive right in. So first I'd like to talk about audio environment as an idea. Audio environment, think about just the sounds around you in the room. There's the sound of the fluorescent lights here, and we look at, specifically for today, what are the sounds around you when you're trying to do work, whether that be homework, doing work for a professional job, if you work at an employment, and you have many different options, different types of things that might be around you. It could be silent. For lots of students here on campus, you might have music or TV in the background while you're studying, or you might be talking with friends. And for these kinds of reasons, classically, lots of libraries keep it quiet. Some libraries even, it's completely silent. Or you have over on the right there, you see a picture, lots of people choose to have a specific environment of their type of music that they like to use when they study. Looking at this study back in 2005, just give you an idea of the type of research that's normally done in the audio environment area. Choi and McPherson, this is a study done in urban Hong Kong in China. They looked at 47 classrooms, and they measured the ambient noise volume and the noise volume of the actual instructor who was speaking. You can see the means there, so that the difference between the actual instructor's volume and the volume of all the background noise is only about 13 decibels, which is very small. And in Hong Kong, they had a recommended difference of about 15 decibels. So this is the kind of research that they're doing with audio environment. And as a result of that, they sort of make recommendations. You should add carpets to decrease the amount of background noise, or you should add window coverings, things like that. And then the second part of what we're looking at is attention, and so how that audio environment affects your attention. The basic definition of attention that can be found in pretty much any introductory psychology textbook is the element of cognitive functioning in which the mental focus is maintained on a specific issue, topic, or activity. So we always, when we're in class or we're working on anything, we want to have good attention, like the person down in the bottom left there. We don't want to be checking our phone, or we don't want to be daydreaming, things like that. When we look at attention, there's a study back in 2008. Attention is tested a lot, especially in the clinical realm of psychology. Thing over there called the TOVA company. It stands for Test of Variabilities of Attention. And it's a commonly used objective assessment to evaluate things like ADHD. And it's called a Continuous Performance Test, or CPT. So you're going to be talking a lot about CPTs today. Stochastic resonance plays into what we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to give you a very brief background on it. It's a physics phenomenon, the idea that in a nonlinear system, and I'll explain what that is, a certain amount and type of background noise can actually aid in the transmission of a signal as opposed to decrease it. So here we're looking at specifically if we have a certain amount of that audio environment, if it's a certain type and amount of it, can we actually increase attention as opposed to decreasing attention, which is the normal convention of thinking we have a loud environment, it's going to be harder to pay attention. Specifically, when we look at stochastic resonance, a fairly new idea of applying it to people. You look at this study just a couple years ago, Mino and Durand made a computerized model of a part of the brain, specifically the hippocampal CA1 region of the brain, and they were able to show, this is in a computerized model, the presence of stochastic resonance having an effect on that transmission of signal. So the big questions. So this is what we're looking at for my study. We're looking at in what ways does noise impact human attention, and can stochastic resonance affect human attention, and if it can, does the type of noise matter? All right, and I had two basic hypotheses. We had each person go through 3 different tests. The CPT, the continuous performance test, in a control environment, which is just silence, a TV sitcom environment, so we had a soundtrack from a TV sitcom playing in the background while they're trying to do this task, and the third environment was a pink noise environment, and it sounds a lot like static or white noise that you might hear. And our hypotheses were that during the TV sitcom environment, there would be a decrease in their scores, so they wouldn't do as well on the attention test. And for the pink noise environment, there wasn't a lot of prior research predicting it. We thought that there would be some type of effect. We weren't really sure in what direction, better or worse. So We did this study. First of all, we got IRB approval by the university, Human Subjects Committee. Participants were recruited from the psychology subject pool, and one participant at a time completed some pretest questions. Then they did the CPT test in all 3 of those conditions, and then they did the post-test questions. We ended up having 27 participants, 4 of which, so 14.8%, were male. All participants were at least 18 years old, and they couldn't have any diagnosed attention disorders. So we didn't have any subjects who were suffering from ADD or ADHD. Specifically the CPT, I told you I'd come back to it, I promised. All right, there were 3 conditions, as I said: the control condition, the TV sitcom noise condition, and the pink noise condition. You see here sort of laid out what they did for each condition. So they had a low target ratio so that they could, if you see on the right there, you have 2 white squares, one that's sort of at the top of the screen, one at the bottom. What the subjects are told to do is if they see the white square at the top of the screen, they're supposed to click a little clicker. If they see it at the bottom of the screen, they're not supposed to click. So they had 2 different phases, one where they had lots of targets, and one where they'd had not that many targets. And they did both of those for each, the control condition, the pink noise condition, and the TV sitcom condition. So the test in total took about 29 minutes without the questions and the setup. So for that CPT, the test is collecting a lot of data. So there's a total of about 130 stimuli that are presented for each phase. There are a total of 6 phases per participant, and so you have about 750, around there, it varies, for each participant data points. And we're measuring reaction time in milliseconds, and we're also measuring errors of omission. That's if they should have clicked, but they did not. That's an error of omission, or an error of commission, which is they shouldn't have clicked, and they did. And we keep track of that. And here's some of the preliminary data. I'm going to just very briefly gloss over this. You can see on the left side under variable, we have reaction time for all 3 conditions. Then we had the percent of correct targets and the percent of correct non-targets. And you can see that there's not a huge amount of visible difference in this data, and that's why we go and we do our specific statistical analysis. The first analysis that we did was an ANOVA. It's an analysis of a variance. We did a repeated measures ANOVA to compare the scores on the reaction time between all 3 conditions. And this didn't yield any statistically significant results. And we think we know why. When we had the test running, one of the things that naturally happens is they commit those errors, either an error of omission or an error of commission. And those naturally confound the data about the reaction time because they're built into the test. Now, luckily, one of the things that we're recording are those errors, so we decided to use them. We ran an ANCOVA, which is an analysis of covariance. Basically, what we did is we used the data of those errors in order to help control for that as a confounding variable. So we put those into the model, and then we find out that there is, in fact, a statistically significant difference in the reaction time between those 3 conditions. You can see the p-value is 0.024, which is significant, and Cohen's d of 0.9 is a high effect size, a large effect size. So from this, we then ask a couple more specific questions. What was the answer for our hypothesis? We looked at the difference between the control environment and the TV sitcom environment, using the covariance to reduce that amount of error. And we found that there was no statistically significant difference. They did just as well during silence as they did while listening to the TV sitcom. Very interestingly, though, we did find a difference between the control environment and the pink noise environment. And in fact, the pink noise environment made them do better than in the control environment. You can see down there p of 0.05 and a Cohen's d of 0.879, which is also a large effect size. So we were able to show that, yes, there is evidence here that supports this theory of stochastic resonance in human beings. We see that there's a specific type of noise, this pink noise, which actually is doing something different than just regular background sound. For the study, we had some limitations on what we were able to do, we're just including college students here because they're all taken from the subject pool. This means that it's not very generalizable outside. The sample size, as I said, is 27. We would love for that to be 2,700. Also, the CPT sensitivity. So the test itself, lots of people found to be relatively easy, although we didn't have a single person do perfectly on the test, so it couldn't have been that easy, but they found relatively easy, so we would think we would want to change that if we were to repeat it. So as I said, in future research, we want to expand this beyond just college students. We have a huge different variety of clinical populations that we could expand this into, the most important which being obviously subjects with ADHD or ADD. If this is something that could help them, that would be a wonderful, wonderful finding. We also would like to look at more detailed measures of attention. So we use the CPT here. We would like to either make that CPT more difficult, which increases the sensitivity and how well people are able to do. We can also go to something like a normed CPT, like the TOVA I mentioned earlier, which instead of comparing somebody to themselves, compares it to a normed database of scores. Or we could go to quantitative electroencephalography, so looking at brain scans, which are much more sensitive and allow you to look at many, many more factors involved in attention. Just wrapping up, I'd like to say some thank yous. First of all, to Dr. Natasha Segul, my thesis advisor, who was immensely helpful. Also, Dr. Vivian, who's here, who helped a lot, especially with the number stuff. Also, they're not here because they're in Montreal and Ottawa, respectively. Mark Saab, up over at Thought Technology, who helped me with all of the equipment and the software for this, as well as Dr. Paul Swingle, who helped supply the pink noise that we used for the study. So thank you very much.